We're back in October, which means we're back in the Halloween season, which means it's time for another rendition of the top horror franchises to watch this Halloween. Now, I made this video 2 years ago, obviously covering some of the more major franchises like Scream, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and I will mention them in this video, but this is going to be for other franchises that maybe I missed, I didn't have time to get to, franchises that recently hit the 3 minimum movie mark, and then also for franchises that have recently expanded their universes from that first video. For example, let's say for Friday the 13th, even though we haven't gotten a new Jason related movie, the Jason universe is a cinematic universe they're pushing now, and they just made a short film, so I'm going to talk about that world here as well, among others, and we'll get into that later. But for now, welcome to Big Flick Energy, and let's get right into another top horror franchises to watch this Halloween. And we start with the Hostel Universe, which has 3 movies and is supposed to get a series soon, but I guess we'll talk about that series in part 3 of this video. But Hostel, it starts in 2005 where 3 backpackers traveling through Europe are lured to Slovakian hostel where they're kidnapped and tortured by an elite organization that sells victims to wealthy clients. Paxton escapes after killing one of the clients and rescuing a victim, and it introduces the Elite Hunting Club, the shadowy group behind all the films, which we continue to see in the next film in 2007 where 3 American women studying abroad are kidnapped and sold to the EHC, while the story also follows 2 wealthy men who pay to torture them. One loses his nerve, the other goes through with it, and one woman, Beth, turns the tables and buys her freedom by joining the organization, which expands their structure, showing how rich clients buy in and how victims are processed. And it connects directly to Hostel through Paxton's cameo at the start of the film. And this is followed by the final film in this trilogy in 2011, set in Las Vegas, where a group of friends are lured to a fake bachelor party where they're trapped by the EHC, which now operates like a live betting casino where clients gamble on the methods of death. The protagonist Scott manages to fight back and kill the ringleader. It shifts the EHC operations from the Eastern Europe to the US, showing its global reach and evolution. And like I mentioned before, all 3 films center on the Elite Hunting Club, a secret organization that abducts tourists and sells them as victims to wealthy clients for torture and murder. And then after this, we can go to the X Universe. What is the X Universe? Well, we have 3 stories that it was a planned trilogy with Pearl, X, and Maxine. We start with Pearl, taking place in 1918, where young farm girl Pearl, trapped caring for her sick father and dominated by her strict mother, dreams of becoming a star but descends into murderous madness when her ambitions are crushed. It's a prequel to X showing Pearl's origin as the unstable killer on the farm. Where in X, in 1979, a group of filmmakers rent a rural Texas farmhouse to secretly shoot an adult film, only to be hunted down by an elderly couple, Pearl and Howard, where Pearl's later life reveals her bitterness towards youth and sexuality, tying directly back to her violent origins in Pearl, which is then followed by Maxine in the 1980s, where sole survivor Maxine from the movie X, after escaping Pearl's massacre, pursues her dreams of becoming a Hollywood star while being stalked by a new killer in Los Angeles, which is a direct sequel to X following Maxine's survival and ambition as a twisted mirror of Pearl's failed dreams. Then after this we can go to the 28 Later universe, which is about to have its 4th part release in 2026 with 28 Years Later Bone Temple, but we'll speak on that in part 3. But for this video, we start with 28 Days Later in 2002, where after a rage virus escapes a lab, bike courier Jim wakes from a coma to find London overrun by the infected, joining survivors to escape both monsters and brutal soldiers, and establishes the rage virus outbreak in the UK and the collapse of society. Then directly after this, we have 28 Weeks Later, where months after the initial outbreak, NATO forces attempt to repopulate London, but the virus is accidentally reintroduced, leading to another catastrophic spread, which shows the continued fallout of 28 Days Later, showing the virus persisting despite containment efforts. And then the recently released 28 Years Later, in 2030, decades after the original outbreak, humanity faces the long-term consequences of the rage virus, with survivors confronting a world permanently reshaped by infection. It acts as the long-awaited continuation of the saga, showing the ultimate legacy of the Rage virus introduced in 28 Days Later, which ends with a twist which leads directly into 28 years later, Bone Temple, which we'll be getting later next year. Now, after we have a world that some people would consider horror, some people won't, some people would just consider it a classic movie, but it is the Jaws franchise that I think we have to talk about because of how iconic it is. And we start with Jaws in 1975, where police chief Martin Brody battles a massive great white shark terrorizing the small island town of Amity, teaming with a fisherman and a scientist to kill it. Establishes Amity Island as the setting and Brody family as central figures, where in Jaws 2 in 78, Brody once again faces another great white near Amity, this time targeting local teenagers stranded at sea. Then we continue with Jaws 3D in 1983, where Brody's son Mike, now working at SeaWorld, must stop a great white that infiltrates the marine park and traps tourists, which shifts the focus to the Brody children, showing the threat following the family. After we have Jaws the Revenge in 1987, with Ellen Brody, where she believes a shark is deliberately targeting her family after her son is killed, and she confronts it in the Bahamas. It ties directly back to the Brody family, portraying the shark attacks as almost a curse across generations. Which, if it actually is a curse, this franchise fits perfectly into this video. As the saga follows the Brody's family multi-generational battle with great white sharks, starting with Martin Brody in Amity and eventually shifting to his children, with the final film suggesting the sharks are supernaturally fixated on the family. And then the next franchise we go to is the Critters universe. Starting in 1986 with Critters, where alien bounty hunters pursue small carnivorous creatures called krites that escape to the Kansas farm, where a family fights for survival, which establishes the krites and the bounty hunters, starting the Earth invasion saga. Then we go to Critters 2, the main course, in 1988, where the krites return to Grover's Bend when leftover eggs hatch, forcing townsfolk and bounty hunters to battle them during Easter. To direct sequel revisiting the same town and survivors, expanding krite lore, which is followed by Critters 3 in 1991, where krites infest a Los Angeles apartment building, trapping residents, including a young boy named Josh, which shifts the setting to the city, spreading the krite invasion beyond Grover's Bend. Then in Critters 4, a year later, the last krite eggs are preserved and end up on a space station in the future, where they hatch and terrorize the crew, which takes the saga into space, closing the original continuity of Bounty Hunter vs. Krites. And then many years later, in 2019, we actually have Critters Attack, where a new group of Krites land on Earth and attack a college town, where students discover a benevolent female Krite named Bianca, which is a soft reboot / legacy sequel acknowledging earlier attacks while introducing a new spin with good Krites. So it does take place in the same world, it just changes what we knew about it a little bit. Then to continue this main story in 2019, we have Critters: A New Binge, which is a web television series that not many people know about, but the show follows a high schooler named Christopher, who along with his friends encounters the Fury, carnivorous aliens, as they return to Earth on a secret mission. And overall, the series follows the Krites' repeated invasions of Earth with bounty hunters and humans battling them across decades. Then the next franchise that we'll talk about is the Omen Universe, which starts with the first Omen, which is the most recently released movie actually, where a young American woman in Rome uncovers a Vatican conspiracy to engineer the birth of the Antichrist, leading directly to Damien's arrival, which follows up with the Omen in 1976, where US Ambassador Robert Thorne secretly adopts a child, Damien, unaware he is the Antichrist, whose presence brings death and disaster to all around him. And this is followed up by The Omen in 1976, where US Ambassador Robert Thorne secretly adopts a child, Damien, unaware he is the Antichrist, whose presence brings death and disaster to all around him, which begins Damien's story, introducing the prophecy of the Antichrist and his rise to power. Next, we have Damien, Omen 2, in 78, where teenage Damien attends military academy while slowly realizing his demonic destiny, eliminating anyone who stands in his way. After this, we have Omen 3, The Final Conflict in 1981, Where now an adult and US ambassador, Damien uses political power to prepare for Armageddon, but a group of priests armed with holy daggers try to stop him. It climaxes Damien's arc as the Antichrist, directly fulfilling the prophecy introduced in the first film. And then we have Omen 4, The Awakening, where a young girl named Delia is adopted by a wealthy couple only to reveal she is Damien's daughter and heir to his demonic legacy. Where this entire series tracks the rise of Damien Thorn from his engineered birth to his adult reign. And this is followed by the Strangers Universe, which I really don't fully know how to talk on this one because the first two Stranger movies that came out a while back, people enjoyed those. But then we have The Strangers Chapter 1 and Strangers Chapter 2, which are recently released, and people are not a big fan of it, trying to tell the origin of the Strangers. But since that's what it's doing, let's talk on it. And we start with The Strangers Chapter 1, where a young couple traveling to start a new life stops in a small town only to be stalked and terrorized by three masked strangers, which serves as the first part of a prequel trilogy showing the origins of the masked killers before that 2008 film. We're then in Chapter 2. It follows the aftermath of the first film, where the masked strangers return to hunt down Maya after learning she survived the events of the first movie. And we continue this with the Strangers Chapter 3, which we have not gotten yet, but will be in part 3 of this video, and then The Strangers, the main movie, where a couple staying at a remote vacation home are terrorized through the night by three masked intruders for no reason, other than because you were home. It's the core film in the franchise, showing the killers' methods at their most ruthless, chronologically following the prequels. Then after this, we have The Strangers Prey at Night in 2018, where a family staying at a deserted trailer park is hunted by the same trio of masked killers, which is a spiritual sequel to The Strangers, featuring the same killers and continuing their random, motiveless murder spree. Then after this, we go to the next franchise, which is another one similar to Jaws, which some people don't consider horror, and I'll say it probably started closer to that thriller horror route and continuing the transition more to just action, and that is the Jurassic Park universe, which I'm still going to speak on because of how renowned it is. And we start with Jurassic Park in 1993, where wealthy entrepreneur John Hammond builds a dinosaur theme park on Isla Nublar using cloned dinosaurs, but when security fails, the creatures escape, endangering visitors, which establishes InGen's dinosaur cloning tech and Isla Nublar as a dinosaur sanctuary with the central idea of humans playing God with extinct life. After we have the Lost World Jurassic Park in 1997, where a second island, Isla Sorna, houses free-roaming dinosaurs. A scientific expedition visits to document them, but mercenary interference leads to chaos on the mainland. And this is followed by Jurassic Park 3 in 2001, where a divorced couple hires paleontologist Dr. Grant from the first film to guide them over Isla Sorna under false pretenses, and they must all survive dinosaur attacks, which continues the exploration of Sorna and reinforces the danger of human interference with dinosaurs. Next, we have Jurassic World in 2015, which takes place a long time in the future from that first film, but is a continuation of that same legacy, where a fully operational dinosaur theme park is finally open, and it's open on Isla Nublar, but a genetically engineered hybrid dinosaur escapes and causes havoc throughout the park. It introduces hybrid dinos and links back to the original park facilities, bridging the modern dinosaur resurgence, which is then followed by Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, which is an animated series, which obviously not horror in any way, but it shows 16s attending an adventure camp on Isla Nublar the day the dinosaurs break free and becoming stranded, fighting to survive and escape the island. And it runs parallel to the Jurassic World franchise, which we'll get into later with the sequel series that comes from this. But after we have Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom in 2018, where after volcanic eruption threatens Isla Nublar, a rescue mission brings dinosaurs to a mansion facility, but a plot to weaponize them is uncovered, and it ends the sanctity of the parks, sending the dinosaurs into the real world, which we'll follow up with in Battle at the Big Rock, the short film in 2019, where a family camping near Big Rock National Park encounters dinosaurs roaming freely 1 year after Fallen Kingdom, which acts as a bridge between Fallen Kingdom and Dominion, showing dinosaurs are now part of everyday life. And honestly, Battle at Big Rock probably brings back that horror story from that first movie the best. After we have Jurassic World Chaos Theory, an animated series, where members of the Nublar Six reunite 6 years after Camp Cretaceous to unravel a conspiracy threatening both humans and dinosaurs. And it fills in the events leading into Dominion, where with dinosaurs now living across the globe, humans and their allies must stop a conspiracy involving genetic engineering and restore balance to the world. It brings together characters from the original and new trilogies, concluding the arc of dinosaur-human coexistence. Although it does set up a future with Jurassic World Rebirth, where 5 years after Dominion, an extraction team is sent to a hidden island facility to retrieve dinosaur genetic material. But they encounter mutated beasts and buried secrets here. It continues the world where dinosaurs roam freely, deepening genetic dangers and InGen's hidden agendas. What's interesting here, though, is after these 5 years of the dinosaurs roaming the world, they've actually started to die off because they are not built for modern climates. So there are only certain areas where they live, and this actually brings back the horror that we saw in Battle at the Big Rock and the original Jurassic Park movie. So I do like that they were able to incorporate that here. But after that, we have the Unrated Universe. What is the Unrated Universe, you ask? Well, it includes Terrifier and the Toxic Avenger. And Terrifier has become, or I guess Art the Clown, has become probably the most renowned modern horror icon. I have not seen a horror icon gain this recognition in a long time. You have Pennywise the Clown, and now I find it interesting that the two modern ones that have become popular are Pennywise and Art, which are both clowns. We have a third one with the Grabber in the Black Phone franchise that I think will actually gain a lot of recognition in the future. But we're not going to talk about that because we only have 2 movies there. So that's not part of this franchise yet. But this world, the Unrated Universe, starts with All Hallows Eve in 2013. On Halloween night, a babysitter discovers a mysterious VHS tape containing 3 disturbing short films, all featuring a silent, sadistic clown known as Art the Clown, which introduces him, establishing him as a supernatural or demonic killer who exists beyond normal reality, serving as the foundation for the Terrifier mythos. But after we have All Hallows Eve 2, where another woman receives a VHS tape filled with more gruesome horror shorts linked by a masked, unknown trickster who delivers the tape on Halloween night. It keeps the anthology format but moves away from Art the Clown, expanding the Unrated Universe concept of interconnected Halloween-based evil entities. After this, we have Terrifier in 2017, where on Halloween night, 2 women are stalked and brutally tortured by Art the Clown after a chance encounter in a deserted apartment building, which, fully centering Art as a main villain, confirms his supernatural durability and demonic presence, which is followed by Terrifier 2 in 2022, where a year after his apparent death, Art is mysteriously resurrected by a sinister entity known as the Pale Girl, and he targets a teenage girl, Sienna Shaw, and her brother, which expands Art's mythology, introducing Sienna as a potential chosen holy warrior opposing him, and adds supernatural elements linking back to the demonic energy hinted in All Hallows Eve. After we have The Toxic Avenger in 2023, which isn't a horror movie, and I only included it here because it is an X-rated or unrated movie. Yeah, definitely not X-rated, but no. Because it's an unrated movie made by the same people from Terrifier, so I thought, why not? This actually works very well here. And who knows, maybe eventually we see Art face off against the Toxic Avenger. That would be a lot of fun to see. I doubt it, but maybe. Who knows? But in this story, a janitor named Winston Goose mutates into the hideously deformed but well-meaning Toxic Avenger after exposing to toxic waste and begins cleaning up crime and grotesque violence. And a big reason why it is in this world, because it also has very similar themes, where it blends splatter horror with dark humor. After we have All Hallows Eve Trickster in 2023, where a mysterious trickster returns on Halloween night to torment new victims via another cursed videotape, drawing a connection to both Art the Clown and the sinister forces manipulating him, which serves as a bridge between All Hallows Eve and Terrifier, expanding the idea that Art is one of several demonic entities unleashed each Halloween by a greater evil. After this, we have Terrifier 3, taking place in 2024 or 2025. Where, taking place on Christmas Eve, Art the Clown returns once again to unleash carnage in a snow-covered town, continuing his battle with Sienna and deepening the supernatural war. It evolves a universe beyond Halloween, suggesting art's power transcends seasons and tying all prior demonic events into one shared horror mythos. And then we close the Unrated Universe out with All Hallows Eve Inferno, the latest rendition in the world of the Unrated Universe, where the Unrated Universe began as Halloween-themed horror anthologies before evolving into a connected mythos centered on Art the Clown. And the next world we have here is the Twisted Childhood Universe, one that is actively running. And it's such a random one to have been released because it's, like it says, Twisted Childhood. It's the one that has the Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey infamous movie, not to mention the other movies in this world that I don't think a lot of people know about. But we start with Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey in 2023, where after being abandoned by Christopher Robin, Winnie the Pooh and Piglet become feral killers, terrorizing a group of young women in the 100-Acre Wood, which launches the universe, establishing the tone of corrupted childhood icons turned savage after losing innocence and human connection. After we have Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey Part 2. Now, this is an interesting story here because it actually establishes that the first Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey movie was just a movie in this world. It's similar to what happens with Scream, where movies about Scream are made afterwards. The only difference here is it keeps the same name. The first Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey is based on a true story in this world, and then we see that true story in the second movie, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey Part 2, where Pooh and Piglet expand their rampage beyond the woods, joined by other twisted versions of classic characters like Tigger, while a survivor from the first film seeks revenge, which expands the lore and world building, showing that multiple storybook monsters exist in the same shared reality, setting up crossovers with future characters, which we'll eventually see down the line, but these have not been released. But the next one is Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare in 2025, where a darker reimagining of Peter Pan, where Wendy discovers Neverland has become a nightmarish realm ruled by a monstrous Peter and his deranged Lost Boys, which has Easter eggs references Pooh's rampage and a connected universe of corrupted fairy tales, which we continue to see in Bambi the Reckoning in 2025, where after witnessing his mother's brutal death, a feral and vengeful Bambi grows into a monstrous predator, turning the forest into his hunting ground, which is another chapter in the shared horror universe. We will continue to see stories in this world down the line, which include the likes of Pinocchio Unstrung, Pooniverse Monsters Assemble, which is like their Avengers, I guess, and then Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey Part 3. But for now, with the next world, we have I Know What You Did Last Summer in that universe, where the first movie in 97, after accidentally running over a man and hiding his body, four friends are stalked a year later by a hook-wielding killer who knows their secret, as this story introduces the Fisherman Killer, and is followed by I Still Know What You Did Last Summer in 1998, where Julie James, still haunted by the past, wins a trip to Caribbean Island where she and her friends are once again hunted by Ben Willis and his vengeful son, which is a direct sequel, continuing Julie's story, expanding the killer's family legacy, and solidifying the I Know curse of past sins returning to haunt survivors, which is similar to what we'll see in the third movie, I Know What You Did Last Summer in 2025, that recently came out, where set decades later, surviving characters are forced to face a new generation repeating their same deadly mistake, covering up a tragic accident that reignites the fisherman's legend. And this franchise follows a repeating cycle of guilt, cover-ups, and vengeance, all linked to the fisherman's legacy. And then we continue with actually a Christmas franchise here, but it's a horror franchise, so it's in this video, with the Silent Night, Deadly Night universe, which starts with Silent Night, Deadly Night in 1984, where after witnessing his parents' murder by a man in a Santa suit, young Billy grows up traumatized and years later dons the same suit to embark on a killing spree during Christmas, which establishes the franchise's central theme, Christmas trauma transforming victims into killers, which is followed by Part 2 in 1987, where Billy's younger brother Ricky recounts the events of the first film from an asylum, then escapes and continues his brother's murderous rampage, infamously shouting "Garbage Day," which ties both brothers into one bloody legacy. Then in Part 3, Better Watch Out, Ricky, now comatose with a brain dome implant, awakens from a psychic link with a blind clairvoyant woman and sets out to kill her during Christmas, which closes out the Caldwell Brothers trilogy that began with Billy and Ricky's shared trauma. Next, we have Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4, Initiation in 1990, where a reporter investigating a mysterious Christmas Eve suicide uncovers a female cult performing occult rituals connected to fire and rebirth, which is a standalone story and drops the Santa killer angle entirely, keeping only the Christmas setting and thematic link to dark horror holiday transformations. But it's still part of this universe since it has the name Part 4. And then we have the fifth story, The Toy Maker, in 1991, where a toy shop owner and his eerie son create deadly sentient toys that kill anyone who receives them during Christmas, which is another standalone entry, continuing the anthology-style direction of Part 4, but still set in the same world of twisted Christmas horrors. Then the next world, which we kind of spoke on in the first video, but not really, is the Jordan Peele universe, and I say we sort of spoke on it because we only mentioned the Candyman movies, but more and more that I look into it, I kind of want to just include every movie that Jordan Peele has both directed and produced into this world. And it'll show how the Jordan Peele universe, or Monkey Paw related works, which is Jordan Peele's company, live in a shared universe. And it starts with Candyman in 1992, where a graduate student researching urban legends in Chicago's Cabrini Green Project summons the vengeful spirit Candyman, triggering violence and horror, which is then followed by Candyman Farewell to Flesh in 1995, where Tony, a descendant of the original victim, returns to New Orleans and confronts Candyman's legacy in the French Quarter. And the next story we have in this world is one that is very interesting to include here, which is Being John Malkovich. And I'll explain why when we get to the next project. But here, after discovering a portal into the mind of actor John Malkovich, a puppeteer and his colleagues exploit it for profit and personal gain. Now, it's not directly tied to Peele's horror works, and it's not even one of Jordan Peele's works. I mean, neither were the first two Candyman movies. But it is included in this world because Jordan Peele himself actually said in a video, after somebody theorized that this movie is connected to Get Out, he actually confirmed it. So we kind of have to include Being John Malkovich in this world. And I mean, it's a good movie, so it doesn't hurt to have it here. But it ties in because of the ability for a puppeteer to exploit somebody else's mind, which would be John Malkovich's in that story. But we eventually get to see it happen in a similar fashion in Get Out in 2017, where a black photographer visits his white girlfriend's family and uncovers a secret society that transplants white brains into black bodies, where Peele's breakout social thriller sets the tone for his universe, horror-grounded in real-world social horror, which is then followed by Us in 2019, where a family's beach vacation is turned nightmarish when their doppelgangers emerge from underground and attack them, and it shares themes, visual motives, and some Easter eggs with Get Out, and Peele has hinted both films are part of a larger project, though he stopped short of confirming a concrete shared timeline between these stories. But I want to include them in the same world. They're very similar in terms of tone. I mean, the end of Us kind of ruins the opportunity for many projects being in this world. But I don't even know what I'm going to say. I really don't have an answer for how it fits in. I'm just going to include it because Us was a great movie in my opinion. And probably the craziest twist that I've seen at the end of the movie. Well, I would say that's the craziest twist. Joker's the craziest twist. Or Inception is the craziest twist. And honestly, the movie Us is a big reason why I decided to start this channel, because of all the theories that were coming out of who was actually tethered by the end of it and who was from the other side. I love that movie. It's probably the movie that also got me into horror at that point. So I have to include in this world. It's too personal to me to not include here, even though the way that it ended doesn't necessarily work with the rest of the world. I'm just going to assume the tethered weren't the smartest. Eventually, like, the military probably took them out. The world was probably repopulating. And then we continue with Candyman Day of the Dead, which is an interesting story to mention here because it came out around the same time as the first two Candyman movies. But it takes place after the new Candyman reboot, So it's kind of interesting to see how these two stories connect since they're around the same time, but we're going to include them in the same story and just say that the Candyman then goes to somebody else here. And that is because in this story, it follows Caroline McKeever, a distant relative of the Candyman, as he returns to haunt her during the Day of the Dead celebration in East Los Angeles. I think it does have to be included here because it is part of that original and can tie in smoothly with the recent Candyman that was released. But for now, I'm actually going to say that Day of the Dead takes place right before. I feel like it's going to be an easier story to tell if that's the case. But we continue with Nope in 2022, where siblings running a horse ranch in California attempt to film unidentified aerial phenomena, but discover a predatory alien is manipulating their lives through the form of a UFO, which actually isn't a UFO, it's an alien in and of itself. And I mean, there's really nothing too big here that connects it to the larger world, apart it being directed by Jordan Peele and part of those 5 movies that he wanted to do from horror. After we have Wendo and Wind, where 2 demonic brothers recruit a teenage girl to summon them from the underworld, only to confront their own demons, which introduces a more demonic side to this world of Jordan Peele movies, which we've seen through Candyman, but not through his other projects. And this is followed by Him, which recently came out, and I will say this movie did not perform very well. A lot of people were very disappointed with it, where rising football quarterback Cameron Cade, who is offered a chance to train with his idol Isaiah White, after suffering a career-threatening injury, sees things that are kind of interesting in the way that he trains. Whereas the training progresses, the protagonist descends into a disorienting and sinister world, and it's small scale enough where it could fit in with these other stories. And then the next one that I'm going to mention is actually the MCU, but I'm not going to talk on the full MCU. I'm only going to talk on the horror projects in this world, which is very minor. It's WandaVision, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and Agatha All Along. It's literally just that trilogy. I was waiting for Agatha All Along to come out to include it in this video. If you want to watch the full MCU watch order, I actually just released a video on that full watch order, including all multiversal aspects, which will go deeper into these 3 projects and the rest of the world. But for now, we'll just focus on these 3, where we start with WandaVision in 2023, where grieving the death of Vision, Wanda Maximoff creates a false reality in the town of Westview, where she lives an idyllic sitcom life with a recreated Vision and their twin sons. But her illusion begins to unravel as other questions about the truth come out, which introduces Wanda as the Scarlet Witch and reveals Agatha Harkness as a powerful witch seeking to harness her chaos magic. After we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where Doctor Strange teams up with America Chavez to stop Wanda Maximoff, now fully the Scarlet Witch, who seeks to steal Chavez's multiversal powers to reunite with her children from another reality, which is a continuation of Wanda's arc from WandaVision, showing her corruption by the Darkhold, and is actually considered the first horror movie in the world of the MCU. Even though there weren't too many horror scenes, but there were some themes that led it to get that title. And I would bring up Werewolf by Night, but it doesn't have any direct ties into this trilogy, even though it is part of the same world, but I'm not going to mention it because of that reason. But we have Agatha All Along in 2026. We're freed from Wanda's spell after the events of Multiverse of Madness. Agatha Harkness regains her powers and forms a new coven to reclaim her place among witches while navigating the mystical aftermath of Wanda's chaos, which serves as both a spin-off and sequel to WandaVision, exploring the magical side of the MCU. For now, we jump into the franchises that have new projects from the first video, and we start with the Goated Horrorverse. This is easily the most expansive horror franchise we have. Now, some people have different versions of this world, but I took a different take on which films are included. But first, let me explain to you what this world is. You see, there's no question that Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street are part of the same universe, considering they had a crossover film. However, this also begs the question of whether other horror icons can be in this world, and the best answer we get to this question can be seen in 2 different movies, in Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, and The Bride of Chucky. You see, in The Bride of Chucky, an evidence locker is shown where we can see Michael Myers' mask, Jason's mask, Leatherface's chainsaw, and Freddy Krueger's clawed glove. Then we have The Rise of Leslie Vernon. In this film, which is much less of a horror film, a man is inspired by iconic slashers and becomes one. But to prove his worth as one, he hires a film crew to film his adventures as a slasher. He mentions his inspirations of becoming a slasher being Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, and Freddy Krueger. At first, I thought Leslie Vernon was a guy who saw the movies we see and became a slasher from watching those films. It even led me to wanting to include this film in the Scream universe, since the premise of the movie fits smoothly with Scream, given how lightly both stories take slashers outside of those attacked by them, and their respective lacks of the supernatural. Not to mention how both stories mention horror characters, where Scream makes it clear they are films, while Leslie Vernon does not. However, that can't be the case for a simple reason. Another project that mentions the rise of Leslie Vernon in Hatchet Part 2. Now, this probably sounds like it adds nothing to this world until you realize it actually locks the reference. So in Hatchet 2, a character talks about his hometown of Glen Echo, and the local boogeyman story there about a guy named Leslie Vernon. Now, where is this reference locked? Well, Hatchet connects with Friday the 13th. As a slasher or monster of Hatchet is Victor Crowley, and a character asks whether Crowley is like Jason Voorhees. So this sets up a massive world where most things are interconnected through some unique references, mostly to Friday the 13th. It's expansive, but we're not done just yet, because Friday the 13th and Hatchet each expand this world a little bit more. To start with Hatchet, there is another film in this world in the form of Frozen. No, not that Frozen. This Frozen from 2010. While more of a situational thriller and not being similar to Hatchet at all, Hatchet 2 had an appearance by one of the Frozen characters on TV discussing a lawsuit she is filing because of the events of the film Frozen. So this makes it pretty obvious that despite being so different, they are connected in some ways, which adds Frozen to this expansive universe as well. And on the end of Friday the 13th, this film has a huge connection to the Evil Dead franchise in the film Jason Goes to Hell, where we see the Necronomicon, the book relevant to the entire Evil Dead franchise. This book has the exact same design as it does in the Evil Dead films. Not just that, but while many horror films show the Necronomicon, from my research, only 2 use the same design as Evil Dead does in the forms of Friday the 13th and Pumpkinhead, which means we can also add Evil Dead and Pumpkinhead into this world. And for Evil Dead, they even open up the Necronomicon in Friday the 13th, and we see that it is the exact same book, because it actually is the exact same prop that they used in both films. Now, there is also another Easter egg to another horror franchise in the form of Creepshow, where we see the notorious crate from the first Creepshow film show up in Jason Goes to Hell. So with this world is populated by projects from the worlds of Chucky, Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leslie Vernon, Evil Dead, Hatchet, Frozen, Pumpkinhead, Creepshow, and as I mentioned in the other 2 Halloween universes with Psycho as well. Now, I mentioned that both Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre have multiple different watch orders based on different sequels and ways the franchises have gone forward, so the Goated Horrorverse accounts for whatever storylines were running at the time of the release of The Bride of Chucky, since that was the most likely version used for the film. So for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's the original comprised of Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, its sequel, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation. While on the end of Halloween, it's comprised of the Halloween H20 universe, which is pretty much the film takes place 20 years after the original Halloween, and it also got a sequel in Halloween Resurrection. So there is so much more to discuss for the Goated Horrorverse, like the overall watch order and just expanding on all the connections and actually the story and how it interconnects through each film. But this video would be way too long if I did, so I'll be making a video for this month discussing in depth all the projects in this world because it is massive. But I will speak on the new project from this world, which is Jason Universe Sweet Revenge. And I'm kind of confused of what this Jason Universe thing they've been pushing is.
if it's going to lead to an eventual Jason movie or if it's just going to be short films and Fortnite cameos. But Jason Universe Sweet Revenge, it shows a group of teenagers arriving in Crystal Lake Camp, but one thing they don't know about this place is they were being stalked and mysteriously killed by a mysterious serial killer who's out there for revenge. And this is Jason Voorhees himself, who returns for the first time in many years. And it's great to see him back in this world and adds to the lore of this larger universe. The next franchise we'll speak on is the Aster Cinematic Universe.
Comprising of films by star filmmaker Ari Aster, with 3 disconnected but apparently universally linked films in Hereditary, Midsommar, and Beau is Afraid. Now, is this a theory? In a way. But I would rather tell you what Aster himself said about his films, Hereditary and Midsommar, being connected. Aster told website Fandango, "There's no payment involved, but I would say that the film is something of a companion to Hereditary, although the similarities didn't really occur to me until we were on set and he was speaking on behalf of Midsommar when he said this." So while it isn't a universe in the same way as Halloween or Fear Street is, these films can be viewed together, and there aren't any plot holes created by doing this either. Same goes with Beau is Afraid, which was looked down upon by many fans because for one, it's less of a horror film, and for two, because it just wasn't as good. However, it can still be viewed together, where this is a world more interconnected through theming than it is interconnected through storylines. Both Hereditary, which is found in Max, Hulu, or Prime, and Midsommar, which is found on Fubo or pirating, directed by Ari Aster, delve into the psychological horror of family and community. In Hereditary, the Graham family grapples with a disturbing legacy and the impact of trauma within their bloodline, ultimately tearing them apart. Meanwhile, in Midsommar, the protagonist faces the eerie rituals of a seemingly idyllic community, exploring themes of belonging and the sinister aspects of group dynamics. Both films masterfully navigate the unsettling intersection of personal and communal horrors. Beau is Afraid, which can be found on pirating, it's nowhere else, so I guess you gotta go there, ties in with family history of mental instability and what that builds up to.
But the one added project to this world is Eddington, which is not a horror movie at all. I mean, it's a comedy, a drama, contemporary western, but it's not a horror movie. And I feel like Ari Aster is starting to move away from horror, which we saw that with Beau is Afraid and Eddington now. So I think that if he does one more that's not horror, I'm not going to mention any revisions to this world. I'm just going to mention it as its own thing. And I actually might just take away this franchise altogether from this world. He should really go back to horror. I feel like Eddington Beau is Afraid didn't perform well. Hereditary and Midsommar people really enjoyed. So go back to that, man. Go back. But in Eddington, in May of 2020, during COVID-19, a standoff between a small town sheriff and mayor sparks a powder keg as neighbor is pitted against neighbor in Eddington, New Mexico. And next up for the Scream universe.
This world is very straightforward with 6 interconnected movies, but there is a Scream TV show that does not fit in this world based on how the latest films ignore its presence, so this world just focuses on the films in my opinion. The Scream franchise weaves a chilling narrative across its 6 movies, primarily revolving around the fictional town of Woodsboro until the latest film took the story to New York. It all begins with the original Scream in 1996, which can be seen on Max, Hulu, or Prime, where a masked killer known as Ghostface terrorizes high school students. Subsequent films, including Scream 2, Scream 3, which are also seen on these previously mentioned streaming services, and Scream 4, seen on Peacock, continue to explore the legacy of Ghostface and the ever-present threat to the returning characters. The most recent entries, Scream 2022 and its sequel Scream 6, seen on Paramount Plus, bring a new generation of characters into the deadly game while paying homage to the franchise's iconic past. And honestly, this is a very fun franchise because it is a whodunit story in many ways.
Now, the 2 projects that I'm including in this world are not Scream projects, but they're so similar thematically and actually deal with different holidays apart from Halloween, which of course Scream is closer to dealing with. that I think it fits very well in this world, considering they're actually made by the same company. And this starts with Thanksgiving in 2023, where after a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy, a mysterious Thanksgiving-inspired killer terrorizing Plymouth, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the infamous holiday. And then the next story, which came out in 2025 around the time of Valentine's Day, we have Hard Eyes, where when two coworkers have to survive the Hard Eyes killer on Valentine's Day, the two have to find out who it is, in a similar fashion to the Scream franchise. And honestly, both Thanksgiving and Hard Eyes, such a similar premise to what's done in Scream. I feel like it has to be incorporated in this world. Same people that made it. Why not include in this world? I really enjoyed both of these stories. And then we have Scream 7 that's going to come out pretty soon, but we can't really speak too much on that yet. And then we continue with the DCEU. Yes, it is not dead.
Universe started by Zack Snyder. You heard me right. Now, why would I mention the DCEU when we're talking about The Nun 2? Because one character actually makes a couple of appearances in both the DCEU and the Conjuring universe. This character is Annabelle, the doll from the Conjuring universe who helps us realize why these two worlds, with no overarching storylines, are actually the same world. So it's a pretty random recurring cameo for Annabelle, but this Easter egg has become a staple in some DC films like the first Shazam film, Aquaman, and now in Shazam Fury of the Gods, where I'm almost certain the character will return in some form in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Annabelle has become DC's equal to Pixar's Luxo Ball and Pizza Truck, which show up in all of their films. The reason behind these Easter eggs is because of the directors of these films. For Aquaman, James Wan, creator of the Conjuring universe, and the Annabelle character, directed it. For Shazam 1 and 2, David S. Sandberg directed both of these films along with Annabelle creation. So it makes sense why both of them would want to put staples of their careers into their other films. It is interesting to wonder if there's more to this though. You see, the Conjuring films and DC films are both films distributed exclusively by Warner Bros. Discovery. This is what allows Annabelle to show up in these DC films more easily, but it also opens up the door for the franchises to be connected. Studios know people like me will make these videos saying they are connected, and it'll bring in more fans to both universe, which definitely helped Aquaman in hitting $1 billion at the box office when it came out due to James Wan's horror fan base storming the cinema, combined with DC fans and other fans. This connection is built even more strongly when leaving the realm of film. You see, DC and Conjuring have partnered up before, around 2 years ago to be exact, where they teamed up to release a comic by the name The Conjuring the Lover. What's interesting about this is that it's not a disconnected comic, because the events of The Lover actually officially set up the events of the latest Conjuring film, The Devil Made Me Do It. So not only has the Conjuring universe had its imprint on the DCEU with Annabelle Easter eggs in almost 25% of their films, but DC has had its imprint on the Conjuring universe by distributing comics canon to the Conjuring films with the DC name attached to the projects. Oh, and I can't forget to mention, we can actually see Atlantean artifacts in the film Annabelle Comes Home in the Warren Artifact Room, which, if you're not familiar with the world of The Conjuring, is where the protagonists of the Conjuring franchise keep all their relics from missions and cases they've worked on through the years. Now, I know the two franchises have very different tones, even with Shazam and Aquaman in the DCU, which are actually some of the more lighthearted and comedic DCU films, but we also have to look at what Marvel did with Werewolf by Night and how stylistically different that special is from the rest of the MCU, which in my opinion is a project 100 times more different from the MCU than the Conjuring films are from the DCEU. With all this, I actually think we have enough evidence to make a case for the films being part of the universe, especially since the DCEU is about to end, so it's a pretty harmless theory that is fun and doesn't ruin anything set up in these worlds. Also, when coming up with counter-arguments to this, I really couldn't find any, as the events of the DCEU take place after the Conjuring films, or in the case of Wonder Woman, it takes place years before, in which the world doesn't know of that story of Wonder Woman from World War I until Batman uncovers it in the future. Also, the events of the Conjuring films are small-scale stories that probably only somebody like Amanda Waller or John Constantine, if he exists in this world, would know about and wouldn't make sense to bring up in a DC film because it wouldn't connect to the larger story. So there are no plot holes with the universes connecting either. Another point to add to this is who DC's Kevin Feige is. A couple months ago, we speculated who it could be, and ultimately we were wrong, but it ended up being the duo of James Gunn and Peter Safran. We all know who James Gunn is, but Peter Safran is a name that many less people know. Peter Safran is a figure which has been extremely impactful in 2 cinematic universes as an executive producer. Can you guess which 2? That's right, the DC Extended Universe and the Conjuring Universe. On the DC side of things, he's produced both Aquaman films and both Shazam films, which were all films where Annabelle showed up in, alongside producing The Suicide Squad, which brings in the connection to James Gunn, since that was Gunn's first DG project. For the Conjuring Universe, he was a producer on, well, every film in the Conjuring Universe. So at least to me, it's revealing that one of the main figures behind these 2 universes is now one of the 2 leaders behind the DC Universe. So while you can watch the Conjuring films as part of the soon-to-end DCEU, considering we already know some DCU characters like Peacemaker and Blue Beetle will be joining Gunn's DCU, you should actually also be able to watch these projects as part of the soon-to-begin DCU. DC knew exactly what they were doing, letting Annabelle show up in their films and bringing in Safran as one of the heads of the DCEU. So here's a video about how it's all connected. But now it's time to go into the order to watch all of the projects in this combined DC Conjuring universe. I also won't spoil what happens in the films, by the way, just in case you're interested in watching the Conjuring films, now knowing they're connected to the DCEU or vice versa. I'll just give a quick synopsis of each of the projects instead. Also, I'm not going to go into the multiverse that connects to the DCEU. I'm going to leave that for when Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom comes out, that I'll do a final DCEU watch order. So we start off with Wonder Woman in the year 1918. Here, Diana, an Amazonian warrior princess, enters the human world during World War I to defeat the god Ares and bring peace. We then have a short film called Edda's Mission, which ties into the eventual Justice League film. This goes pretty smoothly into the next film tonally, with The Nun, in which the events of this film take place in 1952, but are a direct result of World War II. Here, a priest and a novitiate are sent to Romania to investigate a suicide at a convent and uncover a demonic force. The next film in 1955 is Annabelle Creation, where the origin of the cursed Annabelle doll is revealed as it terrorizes a group of orphans and their caretaker. So chronologically, the next project in this world should be The Nun 2, but I'll get back to that project later. We then move on to Annabelle's next appearance in the late 1960s film, Annabelle, where a vintage doll possessed by a malevolent spirit terrorizes a couple and a group of girls. This film is then followed up by the 1971 story that started it all, The Conjuring, where paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren help a family haunted by a malevolent presence in their farmhouse. Now, The Conjuring also did something pretty unique, where there was a fan film contest in which the top 5 would not only be advertised by the team behind The Conjuring, but they would also become part of the official canon of the world of The Conjuring. So the first of these projects is Innocent Souls, in which 2 Colombian boys entered an abandoned home during the night and discover a slew of creepy artifacts. This is followed up by the end of the Annabelle trilogy in 1972 with Annabelle Comes Home, where the Warrens' daughter, along with a babysitter and her friend, inadvertently unleash supernatural chaos when they enter the Warrens' artifact room. We then have another short film by the name of What's Wrong with Mom, which follows a distraught daughter as she and her father pray for the safety and health of her mother, who lies possessed by a demon behind a thin shroud in the family's living room. This is then followed up by The Curse of La Llorona 1 year later in 1973. In this film, a social worker and her children face the wrath of La Llorona, a vengeful spirit from Mexican folklore. After this is another short film by the name of Blund's Lullaby, which deals with another character from folklore. This eerie short film was inspired by a Nordic entity known as John Blund, a kind of Sandman-style apparition that descends upon a small house to strike terror into the heart of a little girl. We continue in the Conjuring universe with The Conjuring 2 in 1977, where Ed and Lorraine travel to London to assist a single mother and her children plagued by a poltergeist. After, we have another short film by the name of The Confession. This chilling short follows a young woman named Fiona who seeks solace in a confessional booth. This then takes us to The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It in 1981, in which Ed and Lorraine Warren investigate a murder case where a man claims to have been possessed by a demon when committing the crime. Before that last film, however, we have DC's comic that is canon to the films, The Conjuring the Lover. The next film goes back to where we started the universe with the film Wonder Woman 1984, which, as the title says, takes place in 1984, just 3 years after The Devil Made Me Do It, which is a drastic shift tonally, but we will stay in the realm of magic with this film, where Diana faces a new threat as she battles Maxwell Lord and Cheetah while dealing with some personal challenges. After this film, we jump a couple of years later into 2013's Man of Steel, where a young Clark Kent, discovering his extraordinary abilities, becomes Superman to defend Earth from a powerful alien threat, which directly leads up to 2015's Batman vs. Superman, where, as the name states, sets Batman and Superman up against each other in a battle for the ages. By the way, we're watching Batman vs. Superman the Ultimate Edition for this movie because it's a lot better than the theatrically released version and is actually available on Max. The next film returns to demonology with the character Enchantress in 2016's Suicide Squad. In this film, a team of imprisoned supervillains is assembled to undertake dangerous Black Ops missions for the government. We are now back in the world of The Conjuring with our final short, The Nurse, which tells the tale of a child recovering from eye surgery in a dimly lit hospital, with her eyes wrapped in thick bandages, but the story takes a much darker turn. I know I mentioned since all these films take place in the past, they don't interfere with the DCU stories, but these shorts are such minor stories with no consequences to even the actual Conjuring films, that it doesn't really matter when they are in the timeline, because nobody expected the nurse to fight against Superman. The shorts just add more lore to this combined cinematic universe. We then continue into 2017 with Justice League, which is a direct follow-up of Batman vs. Superman, where Batman and Wonder Woman recruit a team of superheroes to stop the world-threatening Steppenwolf and his parademon army. And once again, we're watching the Snyder Cut and not the original cut, because that cut was pretty mid, while the Snyder Cut is not only a lot better, but also fits more smoothly tonally with the Conjuring universe. In the next film, Annabelle makes her return in 2018 through the film Aquaman, as she sinks to the bottom of the ocean, where it could be said somebody threw her into the ocean to get rid of her. In this film, Arthur Curry, half human and half Atlantean, embarks on a quest to claim his throne as the underwater king and prevent war. However, Annabelle is not gone for long, as she comes back a year later in 2019 in Shazam on a shelf, showing she's returned to wreak havoc once again in the DC Conjuring universe. In this film, a teenager gains the ability to transform into a superhero with various superpowers by saying the magic word Shazam, and we also see some other demons in this world in the forms of the 7 deadly sins. The next film, Birds of Prey, ties back into the Suicide Squad with Harley Quinn, but a couple years later in 2020. Here, Harley Quinn and a group of female anti-heroes team up to save a young girl from a crime lord. We then move on to 2021 with the film The Suicide Squad, not to be confused with 2016's Suicide Squad. This film brings back Harley Quinn for a second consecutive appearance, along with introducing characters like Peacemaker, who gets his own TV show 1 year later in 2022. This film follows a new iteration of the Suicide Squad, which is sent on a deadly mission to a South American island to take down a dangerous regime, while the show Peacemaker follows the titular character while he tries to deal with the mistakes of his past and needs to stop an alien invasion on Earth, which, if you've seen Secret Invasion and were disappointed by it, I recommend Peacemaker because it's a better superhero alien invasion show. The next project, also in 2022, brings us back to the world of magic and demonology through Dr. Fate and Sabak, where Sabak gives us a glimpse at hell in this world in the form of Black Adam. In this film, an ancient being is brought back to life and must protect his home while fending off heroes sent by Amanda Waller. Next, we have 2023's Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which brings back Annabelle on another bookshelf from her last appearance in the DCU, where Shazam and his family must face off against the Daughters of Atlas to save the world. Next up, we stay in 2023 with The Flash, where we are introduced to the multiverse through the reintroduction of time travel, since we hadn't seen it since Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now, this is the only film I need to kind of spoil for what happens next in this world, so spoiler warning for anybody who hasn't seen this film. The film ends with the Flash fixing the mess up that he did. But he didn't learn his lesson, so he decided to still change time. He still changed the past, just to a lesser extent. So while the world isn't completely different anymore, we still have a different version of Batman that is not Ben Affleck. And it's not Michael Keaton. Instead, it's George Clooney. So to continue this world, we sort of start a new timeline here, which includes any films to come out after The Flash alongside the film Batman and Robin. I'm not including Batman Forever because, as it was explained in The Flash, some people can look the same while others can look completely different. So since the Batman actors switch between those films, I'm saying that film is an entirely separate world. So back to the timeline, we continue this revamped timeline with 1956's The Nun 2. In this film, a priest is murdered in France, and it seems an evil is spreading. So Sister Irene must once again come face to face with the demonic force. This is then followed up by 1997's Batman and Robin, which I understand is a ridiculous tonal shift, but I kind of find it funny also, so I'll leave it at that. In the film, Batman and his trusty sidekick Robin must stop the villainous Mr. Freeze from freezing Gotham City and plunging it into eternal winter, while also dealing with the seductive but deadly Poison Ivy's plans for world domination. This is then followed up by 2023's Blue Beetle, which is still in theaters and a really fun film if you haven't checked it out yet. So I might as well do a Nun 2 Blue Beetle double feature since two films in this world are in theaters at the same time right now. In Blue Beetle, Jaime Reyes merges with a symbiotic piece of advanced alien technology and must use it along with the help of his family to take on the cousin of the former Blue Beetle who wants the tech for herself.
We continue this with two projects. The first project is The Conjuring: The Last Rites, taking place in 1986, which came out very recently, where paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren take on one last terrifying case involving mysterious entities they must confront, which is a case that they ran away from in their past. Then to close out this world for the time being, we have Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, where Black Manta seeks revenge on Aquaman for his father's death, and wields the Black Trident's power, where he becomes a formidable foe. And to defend Atlantis, Aquaman forges an alliance with his imprisoned brother as they find a weapon to take on Black Manta. And this story also shows some of the darker side of DC by showing these underwater zombies that are created, the undead, following through with James Wan's trend of having these horror characters in these superhero movies. And then we also see Annabelle cameo in this story, where we see Annabelle actually in Aquaman's house. And that is pretty interesting because it looks like Annabelle is trying to haunt Aquaman, Mira, and their baby. But to be fair, that house does burn down. So by the end of this movie, Annabelle's probably found a new home and a new place to haunt. And while the DCEU is sort of over, considering the Conjuring universe and the DCEU are connected through all these premises that we've spoken on, when we get this new Conjuring series, it's going to continue. The DCEU is never going to die. The Snyderverse will never die, apparently. So I think that's actually pretty cool. We're going to have the DCEU and the DCU running at the same time. Not really, but in my head canon works, so why not? But we continue with the Fear Street universe.
Once again, an interesting chronological order, but with time travel involved, every film is uniquely both a prequel and sequel to its predecessor. The Fear Street movie franchise, comprising 3 interconnected films, delves into the dark history of Shadyside, a town plagued by supernatural horrors for centuries. It begins with Fear Street Part 1, 1994, where a group of teenagers uncovers a malevolent curse that has haunted their town for generations. In Fear Street Part 2, 1978, as you can see the time is going back, the narrative goes back in time to reveal the origins of the curse and the sinister events that unfolded at a summer camp. Finally, Fear Street Part 3, 1666, explores the town's disturbing past, tying together the threads of witchcraft, evil entities, and the desperate fight for survival across centuries, concluding the haunting tale of Shadyside's legacy of terror.
Where the new story in this world is Fear Street Prom Queen, which did not perform as well as the original 3 movies that came out pretty recently also, but this film is set in 1988 and follows a mass killer who targets prom queen candidates at Shady Side High, leading to a deadly night of murder and a deeper conspiracy. And then we continue with the classic Dark Universe.
I mean, what the Dark Universe originally was. A world filled with horror encompassing some of the most iconic horror icons of all time. The classic Dark Universe is a cinematic world featuring iconic monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, and the Wolfman. These films, spanning from the 1930s to the 1950s, tell individual stories of these monsters, often focusing on their origins, tormented existence, and interactions with unsuspecting humans. While each movie stands alone in its narrative, they collectively establish a shared universe, where these supernatural beings coexist, occasionally crossing paths, and contribute to the rich lore of the classic horror cinema in what may be the first large-scale cinematic universe, so Marvel should step aside, because this is where it all started. All of these projects are assorted on different platforms for viewing, but from looking into it, focusing your efforts on Prime and Peacock should get you most or all of these films. Now, this franchise you would think would be the longest, but 2 others actually beat it out. One being the Goated Horrorverse, and another being from a video I posted a couple weeks ago I'll mention later in this video. But it is a long universe. I'm still gonna quickly run through all these projects. So start with Dracula, then Frankenstein, then the Mummy, then the Invisible Man, then the Bride of Frankenstein, then Werewolf of London, then Dracula's daughter, then the Son of Frankenstein, then the Invisible Man returns, then the Invisible Woman, then the Mummy's hand, then the Wolfman, then the Ghost of Frankenstein, then the Mummy's Ghost, the Mummy's Tomb, Invisible Agent, The Phantom of the Opera, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, Son of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, The Mummy's Curse, The Invisible Man's Revenge, House of Dracula, She-Wolf of London, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Abbott and Costello meet the Mummy, Revenge of the Creature, and The Creature Walks Among Us.
Which you're probably thinking, in what way did the classic Dark Universe just release a new product? This Wolfman project that they just released is not connected to it. The Invisible Man that they released a few years ago is not connected to it. So what did they release? And they didn't release a movie. They actually released a theme park ride in the form of Monsters Unchained: The Frankenstein Experiment, which, even though it's not a movie, you can watch the full ride on YouTube, and it is officially canon to the world, and I think it has to be considered as part of this world now. We're taking place in modern day, years after this original franchise. Dr. Victoria Frankenstein's experiment goes awry when she tries to control Dracula, but Dracula escapes and leads a revolt of angry monsters attempting to escape the catacombs, which includes the like of Frankenstein's monster, the creature from the Black Lagoon, the Wolfman, and the monster from the Phantom of the Opera. And honestly, the ride is a great experience. I highly recommend going there and experiencing that. And the entire land of Darkmoor in Epic Universe is pretty much a sequel to the classic Dark Universe, which is really cool to see. But I'm not going to speak on the whole park here. I'm just going to speak on this ride, which is the only one that really gives some sort of cinematic thing to view in this world. And then we continue with the Final Destination universe,
in which chronologically the first film is Final Destination 5 and the 5th film is The Final Destination. The Final Destination franchise follows a dark narrative centered around a group of individuals who miraculously escape a preordained death, but soon become victims of a relentless force known as death itself. It all begins with Final Destination, when a group of students evades a plane crash, setting off a series of fatal accidents. Final Destination 2, 3, and The Final Destination explore similar themes with various characters narrowly escaping death's clutches only to face gruesome fates. Final Destination 5 introduces new characters in a prequel story who, after surviving a suspension bridge collapse, grapple with the inescapable hand of fate, continuing the franchise's tension-filled saga of cheating death. all Final Destination films can be watched on Max or on Prime.
So in this new movie, Final Destination Bloodlines, the story follows college student Stephanie Reyes, who inherits visions of a 1969 disaster at a skyscraper restaurant from her grandmother, Iris, where Stephanie must unravel the origins of the curse and fight deaths designed to save her family from a series of deadly accidents. As her grandmother was supposed to have died in 1969, but since she didn't, death has come for the entire family line that was born past that date.
And now we continue to the new Dark Universe, not the classic, the new, which does include that Invisible Man and the Wolfman stories. And this isn't the one that you're also thinking of, the Dark Universe that was going to be pushed with the Mummy franchise. No, this is an actual horror franchise that incorporates horror stories. And I know what you're thinking, they haven't announced this, it's not official, but one specific director has made it his effort to sort of make it official in his own mind through Easter eggs to his previous stories and larger stories. And this is the director Lee Whannell, who directed Wolfman, Insidious Chapter 3, and The Invisible Man. Not to mention the movie Upgrade, which I recently saw. I absolutely loved it. Highly recommend you all watch it. It's on Netflix right now. And that's also part of this world. And I'll get into that later. So the film that gave James Wan his big break was Saw, which explains why there's a drawing of the iconic Billy the Puppet in the first Insidious film in the protagonist's classroom. Now the two solutions to this in-universe are Saw being a movie franchise within the world of Insidious, or these two films actually taking place in the same world, and I just think it's much more fun to say they're in the same world. Now, it would have been great to have seen an actual puppet of Billy in the Insidious movies, but it looks like James Wan had other plans for that Easter egg in his 2007 film Dead Silence, where we get to see Billy the Puppet once again, but this time as his full self in a sequence where the characters discover a puppet collection where Billy is amongst them. So, based on my logic for including Insidious in this world because of a Billy the Puppet appearance and James Wan directing, it only makes sense for Dead Silence to be given those same rules and to be part of this Insidious Saw universe. And it's pretty cool how Dead Silence can be viewed as an in-between film for Saw and Insidious to show that both types of thrillers can exist in the same world, since Dead Silence has a puppet like Saw, but possession like Insidious as well. Since it is a much less popular film though, and some of you are probably wondering what it's about, I will be doing a short spoiler-free plot synopsis of all of the projects in this world later in this video, so stay tuned for that. Now, there is another film franchise I considered including in this list in the form of The Collector, because I saw this theory a couple years ago that the films are connected, and the theory goes like this. The writers of 3 of the Saw films had pitched the film The Collector under the title The Midnight Man as a prequel to Saw. However, it didn't go through, and the writers instead moved forward with this film as an original story. While it became an original story, you can tell in the actual film how much inspiration it takes from the Saw franchise, with The Collector having a fascination with kidnapping and torture, where the theory is not only what if Saw and Collector are in the same universe, but what if the Collector is actually one of Jigsaw's students in a similar way to others Jigsaw has found throughout the years. So while I was making this video, I realized that this film and its sequel, The Collection, should not be part of this world, for a simple reason, and that reason is the same reason Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon is not a part of the Star Wars universe. Yeah, the worlds are extremely similar, and in both cases, the stories were meant to be part of the original's universe. Sounds like good cases for both, right? Well, no. It was supposed to be part of the universe, but it isn't. Let it be its own thing. Different studios made them. The people behind the larger universe said it's not connected, so it's not connected. The Collector is its own thing, and Rebel Moon is its own thing. But I'll actually hold off on saying Rebel Moon is its own thing for a second, because I have a video in the works of what the Snyderverse actually is, as it includes all Zack Snyder films and spin-offs, including Rebel Moon. So, While only 2 franchises are added to this Saw universe with the Insidious and Dead Silence worlds, it's more than we had before and makes for a fun added feature to this world. Now, it also complicates an already pretty complicated world with what I consider one of the most random chronological watch order for a franchise in Insidious. So let's discuss the watch order for this universe as a whole. So we start this world with 2004's Saw that started everything. In this film, a detective and his partner must solve a series of gruesome puzzles set by a sadistic killer known as Jigsaw. This is then followed by the new film Saw X as a prequel to every other Saw film outside of the original. In this new film, the man behind the puppet and murders becomes the protagonist. I haven't seen this film yet, so I can't go much more in depth, but I'll leave a link to the trailer in the description down below. This film is then followed by 2005's Saw 2, where Jigsaw traps a group of strangers in a deadly house, revealing dark secrets about their past. We continue with the Saw franchise with Saw 3, where Jigsaw's apprentice carries on his legacy, testing a grieving father's willingness to forgive. Now we leave the world of Saw and enter the world of Dead Silence. In this film, a widower returns to his hometown only to discover a vengeful ventriloquist ghost is behind a series of eerie deaths and must take on this mysterious threat. And with that, we can jump into the world of Insidious, with Insidious Chapter 3 being the first film chronologically dealing with Insidious. In this movie, a family faces supernatural horrors when their comatose son becomes a vessel for malevolent spirits. This is then followed up by another Insidious film named Insidious: The Last Key, where paranormal investigator Elise Rayner faces her most personal haunting in her childhood home. Also, now that I'm looking at this world, the 2 main franchises in Saw and Insidious, for this watch order specifically, have patches of when a ton of these films take place. It feels like there's a ton of Saw films in a row and a ton of Insidious films in a row. So to continue that tradition, our next 3 films are Saw 4, Saw 5, and Saw 6, where in Saw 4, detectives uncover the twisted history of Jigsaw and the mystery of his protege. In Saw 5, stranded in a deadly game, 5 people face their past mistakes while struggling to survive. And in Saw 6, Jigsaw's successor targets those who abuse the healthcare system, forcing ethical choices. After this, we jump back to Insidious with Chapter 1, in which a family faces supernatural horrors when their comatose son becomes a vessel for malevolent spirits. After, we have Chapter 2, where the Lambert family delves deeper into the mysteries of their connection to the spirit world. We then go back to Saw with Saw 3D, in which survivors of Jigsaw's traps seek support and help, but a new game threatens them. Now, this is the film that is supposed to be the end of the franchise, until 7 years later, where we get Jigsaw, a film in which a series of gruesome murders resemble Jigsaw's work, raising questions about his return. And very much resembling the same premise, we have 2021's Spiral from the Book of Saw. In this film, once again, a series of murders occur resembling those of Jigsaw, except this time, it's actually a copycat killer who is targeting corrupt cops as a detective leads the charge in this whodunit spinoff. We then return back to the world of Insidious with the recently released Insidious: The Red Door. Here, Patrick Wilson's character returns to drop his son off at school, but his college dream soon becomes a living nightmare when the repressed demons of his past suddenly return to haunt them both.
But in The Invisible Man, when Cecilia's abusive ex takes his own life and leaves her his fortune, she suspects his death was a hoax. As a series of coincidences turn lethal, Cecilia works to prove that she is being followed and hunted by this invisible person, who we know to be the Invisible Man. It's a new take on that classic story, implementing tech instead of more of mysticism, but it fits very well into this world. And to tie this into the world, let's start with the Saw Easter egg, which is a little more basic from what we see with the upgrade Easter egg. But both James Wan and Lee Whannell have frequently used images of Billy the Puppet in their movies in the years since the release of Saw, and now The Invisible Man is the latest chapter in that saga. Her attempts to shoot at her invisible tracker result in another driver having an accident, and you can see a graffiti painting of Billy the Puppet after the driver gets out of his car and Cecilia steals his vehicle, which establishes that in some way, shape, or form, Billy the Puppet is in this world. So this James Wan and Lionel world now includes the Invisible Man. But because there's also a tie-in to Upgrade, it has to include it as well. And I'll get into how Upgrade ties into Invisible Man pretty soon. But first, we have to speak on the Wolfman. And even though the Wolfman doesn't have any direct ties from what I've seen, given it is another classic horror movie from that same world, from the Dark Universe, similar to the Invisible Man, I feel like it's sort of a 1-2 punch that they have to go together. Where in this movie, a family at a remote farmhouse is attacked by an unseen animal. But as the night stretches on, the father begins to transform into something unrecognizable.
Like I mentioned, it's its own story. It's only being included in this world because it is Wolfman. But we can then go on to probably the project that I've enjoyed the most from Lionel, which is none other than Upgrade, taking place in 2046. We're set in an advanced near future. It begins centered on a Luddite mechanic named Gray Trace and his wife Asha, who works for a company called Cobalt, one of the world's biggest technology companies in the world. That's interesting information to keep in the back of your mind when you reread the obituary that Emily shares with Cecilia in the first act of The Invisible Man, which reads, Adrian Griffin, tech entrepreneur and founder of optics company Cobalt, has died aged 38 in what is reported to be a suicide. So, specifically stating that he started Cobalt itself, that is very interesting to tie in Upgrade and The Invisible Man together. And I love little teases like that just connect these two worlds. It makes this universe feel so much more lively when you have that. But what really happens in this movie, a tragedy happens, leading to Gray Trace being paralyzed and having a tragedy with his family. But because of this, he receives an experimental computer chip implant called STEM, which gives him superhuman strength and begins his revenge tour throughout the rest of the movie, which ends with a twist and gives us this future thriller that I don't think many people anticipated to receive. And it's a great way for this movie to end, a great way for this universe to end for the time being, and a great way for this video to end, because there are no other projects that I have on my mind right now to discuss with you guys. I think this is a good list for the time being. Like I mentioned, I'll speak more on the Goated Horrorverse in the future. I'll make that video so that this one doesn't become a 3-hour long video. It's already an hour long. So with that, thank you for watching this video. Please let me know down in the comments your thoughts on some of these other universes that I brought up. What excites you about them? If you think the Twisted Childhood universe is a legit world, if you're excited for the future of the Unrated Cineverse, if you like this new Dark Universe, if you like the old classic Dark Universe, really anything about this video, what excites you, what doesn't. So excited to talk about it in this month. Thank you for watching, and see you all next time on Big Flick Energy.